"You are afraid," said O'Brien, watching his face, "that in another moment something is going to break. Your especial fear is that it will be your backbone. You have a vivid mental picture of the vertebrae snapping apart and the spinal fluid dripping out of them. That is what you are thinking, is it not, Winston?" One particularly unnerving horror among many that Winston encounters during his time with O'Brien in the Ministry of Love is his uncanny ability to know exactly what he is thinking. Indeed, this skill seemingly verges on the supernatural. However, is there a more worldly explanation for how O'Brien can seemingly read Winston's mind? Welcome to 1984 Lore, and today we consider this very question. O'Brien, in fact, appears to accurately read Winston's mind several times during the interrogation. The first instance considered was from the opening quote. The second example was during their conversation about the nature of the past. On that occasion, when asked if he believes that the past has real existence, Winston struggles to find an answer in which he genuinely believes. This provokes a faint smile in O'Brien. O'Brien seems to instantly understand his struggle, commenting that Winston is no metaphysician. This particular example could feasibly be explained by hesitance alone, perhaps expressed in his face, so may not be a particularly potent one. However, it's still quite impressive nonetheless. A later example is when Winston inwardly wonders why, if he is to be destroyed completely, that is, vaporized or swept clean out of all memories and records, why was the party bothering to torture him? Without a word uttered from Winston, O'Brien instantly comprehends the question in his mind. His eyes narrowed in understanding, and he said, quote, "You are thinking that since we intend to destroy you utterly, so that nothing that you can say or do can make the smallest difference, in that case, why do we go to the trouble of interrogating you first? That is what you were thinking, was it not?" "Yes," said Winston. Winston, of course, possesses a mind riddled with heretical thoughts, and the party, according to O'Brien, finds it intolerable for even one erroneous thought to exist, which is why Winston must be cleansed or cured before his eventual vaporization. A final and perhaps the most ominous example we'll consider today is in the closing words of the chapter. Winston lay silent, his breast rose and fell a little faster. He had still not asked the question that had come into his mind the first. He had got to ask it, and yet it was as though his tongue would not utter it. There was a trace of amusement in O'Brien's face. Even his spectacles seemed to wear an ironical gleam. "He knows," thought Winston suddenly. "He knows what I'm about to ask." At the thought, the words burst out of him. "What is in room 101? The expression on O'Brien's face did not change. He answered dryly, "You know what is in room 101, Winston. Everyone knows what is in room 101. So how can this be? How can O'Brien so accurately know in real time, or close to it, what Winston is thinking? I have two explanations based on the law that are not necessarily mutually exclusive. The first possibility is scientific. Though the 1984 universe is a world of lies, we must still take what we do have, in this instance Goldstein's book, which does provide an answer here. The book is a fabrication of the Thought Police, partially written by O'Brien himself. However, he does admit to Winston that it's true as description. In the book, it's explained that the party has two broad concerns. Firstly, how to kill several 100 million people at once and without the possibility of retaliation. Secondly, to discover against his will what another man is thinking. On the latter, the book details how party scientists are either dedicated to branches of knowledge conducive to the former goal or the latter one of determining a man's thoughts against his will. On the latter, the book further details how party scientists are dedicated to branches of knowledge conducive to the latter goal of determining a man's thoughts against his will. To the latter end, scientists study the intricate meanings of facial expressions, gestures, and tones of voice, while also using truth-inducing drugs, hypnosis, shock therapy, and torture. Though this description is quite vague, it does at least provide some context as to how Winston's interrogators can accurately follow his emotions and train of thought. I would personally suggest heavy use of drugs and some kind of monitoring system is used to predict in real time Winston's thoughts. We do see O'Brien and the unnamed assistant use a device to force Winston's memory to conform to the party truth about the war and on how many fingers O'Brien held up. 2 pads are attached to his temples, though their method on mind reading must be different, given O'Brien demonstrates this without such a device. I think given the technology of Orwell's time, in conjunction with the logical extreme in which the party can and does exert its control, even over an individual's thoughts, Orwell has to be vague about the particular method here of mind reading, while at the same time demonstrating this particular power that the party has. Another take on all this, which is not necessarily mutually exclusive to the other, is that Winston is O'Brien's project, and hence intimately known by him. The two are also very similar, both acknowledging they have similar minds. Winston admits in the book that O'Brien is someone he can relate to, or at least talk to, that even if he is an enemy, that O'Brien would still understand him. O'Brien too feels a mutual connection with Winston, even saying that Winston's mind appeals to him, even that his mind resembles his own, though Winston happens to be insane. Winston at one point even verges on agreement with this sentiment, thinking that O'Brien's mind was so much bigger than his, that his mind contained Winston's, and so it must be he that is indeed mad. Aside from this close bond, O'Brien and the Thought Police were also helpfully assisted by Winston's not-so-secret diary too, in which much of his thoughts, attitudes and habits would have been made known to them to further get an idea about his personality and even his probable thinking. It's not exaggerating to suggest that few, if anyone, knows Winston as well as O'Brien by the time of his arrest. O'Brien even states he has watched over him for 7 years. Every aspect of Winston's life was jealously scrutinised, to the point where O'Brien can accurately anticipate his thoughts and answers. Of course, this may be stretching things somewhat, given O'Brien's ability to read Winston's mind seems a step closer to perfect than even this, which still leaves open the possibility of being wrong about a particular point, which O'Brien never is. I think the second explanation alone is not enough to account for the accuracy of O'Brien's mind reading. We see Winston injected with drugs and mentally manipulated at least once, as aforementioned, when he was assisted to remember who Oceania was at war with, and that the fingers O'Brien held up were 5 and not 4. With a mixture of drugs, mental manipulation, and the real-time reading of facial and other physical indicators, it seems highly likely that O'Brien has instant access to real-time information on Winston's thoughts. A final meta-explanation, of course, simply could be an Orwellian appeal to a suspension of belief in this regard. When the novel was written in the late 1940s, it would have been difficult to imagine any such manner of reading a man's thoughts in real time. But since Orwell wanted to write about the most extreme case of totalitarianism, total party control of the human mind and thoughts, as well as a man's physical body, would be the logical end of any such regime, which is what Orwell presents here. Given what we know from the law then, our explanation is a mix of heavy and prolonged surveillance for years, as well as use of mind-altering drugs, as well as psychological conditioning, shock therapy, torture, and hypnosis. The exact method as to how O'Brien reads Winston's thoughts is not known, but Goldstein's book makes it clear this ability to read the minds of thought criminals was one of 2 of the party's highest goals, and, it seems, in the case of Winston at least, they succeeded. So that was how O'Brien could read the thoughts of Winston during his interrogation. What do you think? Was there some other way O'Brien knew what Winston was thinking? Write your thoughts or objections in the comments section and drop the video a like if it was plus good. If this video proved double plus good, then consider subscribing and smashing that bell button like that guard smashed Winston's elbow to be notified about further videos. This enables YouTube to know not to consign the 1984 Law channel to the memory hole. Thanks for listening, and remember, you know what is in room 101. Everyone knows what is in room 101.